The distress beacon pierced through the void of space like a scream in the darkness. Ambassador Kethara of the Villani Coalition pressed her four-fingered hand against the communication console, her usually pristine blue skin now pale with fear. The holographic display showed the approaching enemy fleet, a massive swarm of hive ships that blotted out the stars themselves. "How many?" asked General Thoss, his reptilian features grim as he studied the tactical readout. 7,000 confirmed vessels, sir. Possibly more behind the interference cloud. The young communications officer's voice trembled. Our entire defense fleet numbers barely 300 ships. Kethara closed her large, dark eyes and felt the weight of her entire civilization pressing down on her shoulders. The Villani had been a peaceful species for over 2 millennia. Their technology focused on art, science, and exploration rather than warfare. When the Hive Collective had emerged from the Galactic Rim 6 months ago, consuming everything in their path, the Coalition had been woefully unprepared. What about the other members of the Galactic Council? Thos asked, though they all knew the answer. The Zenthari are already engaged on 3 fronts. The Crystalline Empire has sealed their borders and gone dark. The floating cities of Mertal were overrun last week. Kethara's voice was barely a whisper. We're alone. The command center fell silent except for the steady beeping of sensors and the distant hum of the space station's life support systems. Through the massive viewport, they could see their beautiful homeworld of Valania Prime, spinning slowly below them, its azure oceans and emerald continents completely unaware that their doom approached. There is one option, the communications officer said hesitantly. The emergency protocols include a list of all known spacefaring civilizations, even those outside the Council. General Thoss snorted. You mean the primitives? The species that haven't even developed proper energy shielding or faster-than-light communication networks? Some of them have shown remarkable ingenuity in combat scenarios, Kethara said slowly. The reports from the Outer Rim surveys mentioned a species called humans that showed unusual tactical creativity during first contact simulations. Deathworlders, Thoss muttered. From that insane planet in the Sol system. I remember the xenobiology reports. Their entire evolution was shaped by constant warfare, predation, and environmental catastrophes. Their planet tried to kill them for millions of years. Kethara nodded, which is exactly why they might be our only hope. Every other civilized species in the galaxy developed on paradise worlds. We've grown soft, comfortable. We've forgotten how to fight for survival because we've never had to. The tactical display updated, showing the Hive fleet growing larger as it approached. At their current speed, they would reach Villani space in 18 hours. The Coalition's evacuation ships couldn't possibly save even a fraction of their population in that time. Their technology is centuries behind ours, Thoss protested. What could they possibly do against the Hive that we cannot? I don't know, Kethara admitted. But I know what we've done so far. Lost every single engagement. Maybe it's time to try something different. She turned to the communications officer. Send the distress call. Use the old emergency frequencies. The ones from before the Council standardized everything. Include our tactical data, fleet positions, and... She paused. Tell them we're offering full technological exchange for military assistance. Ambassador, that violates about 30 different Council regulations, Thoss warned. The Council is dead, General. Half the member worlds are ash, and the other half are hiding behind barriers they hope will protect them. Regulations don't matter when your entire species is about to be extinct. The officer's fingers flew over the console, encoding the message in dozens of different formats and frequencies. Message prepared, Ambassador. Shall I send it? Kethara looked out at her homeworld one more time, watching the sun glint off the crystalline cities and the graceful orbital platforms that had taken millennia to build. In 18 hours, it might all be gone, consumed by the Hive's endless hunger for biomass and resources. Send it, she whispered. The message burst outward from the station's powerful transmitters, racing through hyperspace toward distant stars. It would take time to reach the Outer Rim territories where the primitive species dwelled. Time they didn't have, but it was their only chance. As the communication beam disappeared into the vastness of space, Kethara found herself praying to ancient gods her people had long forgotten. Gods of war and survival that had been abandoned when the Villani had transcended their violent past. Perhaps it was time to remember what they had lost in their quest for peace and enlightenment. Perhaps it was time to learn from a species that had never forgotten the lessons written in blood and fire across their homeworld's scarred surface. The humans were coming, though they didn't know it yet. And with them came something the galaxy had not seen in 10,000 years, the fury of a species that had clawed its way to the stars through sheer stubborn refusal to die. The beacon continued its journey through the dark, carrying with it the hopes of an entire civilization and the promise of a reckoning that would shake the galaxy to its very foundations. Admiral Sarah Chen was reviewing supply manifests in her quarters aboard the UES Retribution when the priority alert klaxon began wailing throughout the ship. She'd been expecting another routine patrol report from the outer colonies, not the urgent communication that now demanded her immediate attention in the command center. The bridge of Earth's most advanced dreadnought hummed with activity as Chen strode through the blast doors. The massive holographic display at the center showed a star chart of local space, but something new blinked insistently in the corner, an unknown signal designation that made her tactical officer look distinctly uncomfortable. "Report. Commander Hayes," she ordered, settling into her command chair. "Ma'am, we received an encrypted transmission approximately 47 minutes ago. Source appears to be from deep galactic core, well beyond our exploration range. The signal is unusual." Chen raised an eyebrow. "Define unusual." Hayes gestured to his console, and the main display shifted to show waveform patterns and data streams. "It's using multiple encoding protocols simultaneously, some of which our computers had to decrypt using theoretical models. The mathematical complexity suggests a civilization at least 300 years ahead of us technologically. And they're contacting us because?" The bridge fell silent as Hayes exchanged glances with the communications officer. "Ma'am, it appears to be a distress call. They're requesting military assistance against something called the Hive Collective. According to their data, this enemy has already consumed dozens of star systems." Chen felt a chill run down her spine. Humanity had only been exploring beyond their local cluster for 50 years, and the idea that there were threats of this magnitude in the galaxy was sobering. "Show me everything." The holographic display erupted into a three-dimensional map showing the movement of massive fleets across hundreds of light years. Red markers indicated fallen civilizations, while a growing black mass represented the advancing Hive forces. The scale was staggering. Battles involving thousands of ships, entire worlds being stripped of all life, populations in the billions simply vanishing. "Jesus Christ," whispered Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station. "Look at the size of those enemy formations." Chen studied the tactical data with growing amazement and horror. The alien coalition had technology that made humanity's best ships look like toys. Energy weapons that could crack planets, defensive shields that could withstand the output of entire stars. Yet they were losing badly. "How is this possible?" she asked. "Their individual ships outclass anything we've ever imagined building." Commander Hayes manipulated the display to show battle recordings that had been included with the message. The images were devastating. Sleek, beautiful alien vessels being overwhelmed by swarms of organic-looking ships that seemed to grow and adapt in real time. "From what we can determine, ma'am, these Hive ships are biological constructs. They learn from each engagement, evolving new countermeasures and tactics. The coalition forces appear to be following predictable combat doctrines that the enemy has already adapted to defeat." Chen watched as a magnificent crystalline battleship, easily 10 times the size of her own vessel, was systematically dismantled by smaller Hive craft that moved like hunting pack animals. The alien crew's tactics were flawless by every military textbook she'd ever studied, but they were also completely predictable. "They fight like a chess match," she murmured. "Perfect formation, optimal positioning, textbook maneuvers." "Yes, ma'am." "Very sophisticated, but also very rigid." Chen smiled grimly. Rigid was not a word anyone had ever used to describe human military doctrine. Humanity had learned warfare in the crucible of a planet that spawned predators, natural disasters, and resource conflicts that demanded constant adaptation. Their military thinking had been shaped by species that couldn't afford the luxury of predictable tactics. "What's our response time to their location?" she asked. "Ma'am?" Hayes looked surprised. "You're considering responding?" "Commander, we're looking at the potential extinction of multiple civilizations. If this Hive decides to keep expanding, Earth is eventually going to be in their path." Better to fight them now with allies than later when we're alone. The navigation officer ran quick calculations. Using our best jump drives, approximately 6 hours to reach their outer defensive perimeter, ma'am. But Admiral, our entire fleet consists of maybe 100 ships. Their own forces number in the thousands. Chen stood and walked to the massive forward viewport, looking out at the stars that suddenly seemed much more dangerous than they had an hour ago. Behind her, she could hear her officers murmuring among themselves, calculating impossible odds and discussing the insanity of their commander's apparent decision. "Send a message to Earth Command," she finally said. "Priority Alpha authorization. Tell them we have a potential extinction-level threat requiring immediate fleet mobilization. Then send a response to our alien friends." "What should we tell them, ma'am?" Chen turned back to face her crew, and they saw something in her expression that made them straighten unconsciously. It was the look of a predator that had just caught an interesting scent on the wind. "Tell them the cavalry is coming. Include our tactical databases and military doctrine files. If we're going to help them, they need to understand how we fight. And begin immediate preparations for fleet-wide jump to their coordinates." "Admiral," Commander Hayes said carefully, "with respect, our weapons technology is centuries behind theirs. Our armor can't withstand their energy outputs. By every measurable metric, we should be useless in this fight." Chen's smile was sharp and predatory. "Commander, those aliens out there spent millions of years evolving on worlds that gave them everything they needed. They developed technology to make their lives easier, more comfortable, more predictable. They think like engineers, solve the problem with the most efficient solution." She gestured at the display showing the ongoing alien defeats. "But efficiency isn't always what wins a war. Sometimes you need someone crazy enough to ram a ship into the enemy's flagship, or stupid enough to charge a superior position because retreat isn't an option, or stubborn enough to keep fighting when all the math says you should surrender." The bridge crew was listening intently now, understanding beginning to dawn in their eyes. Those aliens are fighting a sophisticated enemy that adapts to sophisticated tactics. What they need is someone unsophisticated enough to confuse the hell out of everyone involved. Chen's grin was positively savage now. Lucky for them, crazy and unpredictable are humanity's specialties. The first Earth fleet began mobilizing within the hour. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Villani system like a pack of wolves materializing from winter fog. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as her tactical display populated with friendly contacts. 97 ships of various classes, from massive dreadnoughts to nimble destroyers, all bearing the blue and white insignia of the United Earth Space Force. "Admiral, we're receiving communication requests from multiple alien vessels," reported Lieutenant Torres. "They seem confused by our arrival." Chen wasn't surprised. The human ships looked nothing like the elegant, streamlined vessels of the Galactic Coalition. Where alien ships resembled works of art, all flowing curves and crystalline surfaces, human warships were brutal, angular things designed with one purpose in mind: to deliver maximum violence to the enemy, while absorbing tremendous punishment in return. "Put me through to their command vessel," Chen ordered. The main screen shimmered, revealing the bridge of an alien ship that looked more like a luxury resort than a military command center. Soft lighting, organic curves, and what appeared to be actual gardens growing along the walls. The being that appeared on screen was tall and graceful, with blue-tinted skin and large, dark eyes that spoke of intelligence and wisdom. "I am Ambassador Cathara of the Villani Coalition," the alien said, her voice melodious despite the universal translator's interference. We did not expect such a rapid response to our distress call." "Admiral Sarah Chen, United Earth Space Force," Chen replied crisply. "We came as soon as we received your message." "What's the current tactical situation?" Cathara's expression showed confusion at the directness of the question. "The Hive forces have positioned themselves just beyond our sensor perimeter. Our tactical analysts believe they are studying our defensive formations before launching their final assault. We estimate perhaps 12 hours before they attack." 12 hours? Chen frowned. "That's plenty of time. I need to speak with your military commanders immediately." Within an hour, a joint command conference was established aboard the Villani flagship. The luminous dawn. Chen found herself in a conference room that looked more like a meditation garden, surrounded by representatives from a dozen different alien species. The Villani were tall and elegant, The Xanthari resembled living crystals, and the few remaining delegates from other coalition worlds displayed an amazing variety of forms. What they all shared, Chen noticed immediately, was a sense of refined civilization that seemed utterly out of place in a war room. General Thos, the primary military commander, gestured to a holographic display showing both fleets. Admiral Chen, while we appreciate your willingness to assist, I must point out that your force of less than 100 vessels cannot significantly impact a battle involving thousands of ships. Chen studied the display carefully. The Hive fleet was enormous, a dark cloud of organic ships that seemed to pulse and writhe like living tissue, but there was something about their formation that made her tactical instincts prick up. General, your defensive plan seems to be based on establishing a battle line and engaging them in a direct confrontation. Of course, replied a Xanthari commander, his crystalline form chiming softly as he spoke. Our combined firepower, properly coordinated, represents our best chance of inflicting maximum casualties before we are overwhelmed. Chen nodded slowly. And every previous engagement against the Hive has followed this same basic pattern? Naturally, it is the most efficient deployment of our resources. Right. Chen turned to her aide, Commander Hayes, who had accompanied her to the meeting. Hayes, show them the Thermopylae files. The holographic display shifted to show historical human battles. Thermopylae, Agincourt, the Alamo, Rorke's Drift. Small forces facing overwhelming odds, sometimes winning through terrain advantage, sometimes through sheer bloody-mindedness, often losing but taking so many enemies with them that the victory became meaningless. I don't understand, Cathara said. These battles show vastly inferior forces engaging superior enemies in hopeless situations. Why would you study failures? Because sometimes, Chen said quietly, losing the right way is more important than winning the wrong way. And sometimes the enemy gets so used to easy victories that they forget how to handle someone who refuses to play by the rules. She manipulated the display to show the current system layout. General Thos, what would happen if, instead of meeting them in open space, we forced them to come to us? Made them fight in an environment where their numbers are actually a disadvantage? Impossible, said the Xanthari. Space combat requires open maneuvering room for proper tactical formations. Chen smiled, and several of the aliens unconsciously stepped back from the predatory expression. Not if you fight dirty. Over the next several hours, Chen laid out a battle plan that horrified and fascinated the alien commanders in equal measure. Instead of the elegant, honor-bound warfare they were accustomed to, she proposed something that resembled less a battle than an elaborate ambush combined with a series of desperate last stands. You want to hide our ships inside the asteroid field? General Thos asked incredulously. That's impossible. The gravitational stresses alone would tear apart our vessels. Not if you reinforce them properly. We'll show you how to retrofit your ships for asteroid operations. My destroyers have been doing it for decades. And these ramming attacks you keep mentioning, added Kithara. Surely you don't mean literally crashing ships into the enemy? Sometimes that's exactly what I mean. A ship's reactor going critical inside an enemy formation tends to ruin their whole day. The aliens stared at her in horror. But the crews? The crews volunteer, Chen said simply. We have a saying, death before dishonor. Sometimes the best way to save your people is to make the enemy pay such a price for victory that they decide you're not worth conquering. As the meeting progressed, Chen watched the alien commanders struggle with concepts that humanity had learned in 1,000 wars across their homeworld. The idea of asymmetric warfare, of fighting dirty, of using the enemy's strengths against them, these were foreign concepts to species that had grown up in the safety of paradise worlds. But gradually, she saw understanding begin to dawn in their eyes. Not acceptance, not yet, but the beginning of comprehension that there might be another way to fight. One that didn't depend on technological superiority or perfect formations. Admiral, Kethera finally said, what you're proposing, it's barbaric, uncivilized. It goes against everything we believe about honorable warfare. Chen nodded. Yes, it does. But here's the thing about honor. It's a luxury you can only afford when you're not facing extinction. Your honor won't mean much if your entire species is dead. She stood up, looking around the room at representatives of civilizations that had reached heights of art, science, and philosophy that humanity could barely dream of. Beings who had transcended war and violence and built something beautiful among the stars. You called us for help, she said quietly. This is what we have to offer. We're not more advanced than you. We're not smarter or stronger or better. But we know how to fight dirty and we know how to die hard. If you want to save your people, you're going to have to learn both." The silence in the room stretched for long moments. Finally, General Thoth straightened his reptilian shoulders. "Tell us what you need," he said. The transformation of the Volani defense fleet over the next 10 hours was something that would be talked about in military academies for centuries to come. Human engineering crews swarmed over alien ships, retrofitting their elegant hulls with additional armor plating, installing backup power systems, and most importantly, teaching alien crews how to fight like cornered animals instead of civilized beings. Commander Hayes floated in zero gravity inside the engine room of the Zenthari cruiser Crystal Song, watching as his engineers welded human-designed armor plates over the ship's vulnerable quantum resonance chambers. The crystalline crew members looked on in horror as their beautiful, translucent vessel was transformed into something that resembled a mechanical predator. "This is sacrilege," muttered shipsinger Veltar, the Zenthari captain whose vessel was being so thoroughly modified. "We are defiling centuries of artistic achievement for the sake of crude functionality." Hayes paused in his welding to look at the crystalline being. "Captain, with respect, your artistic achievement isn't going to matter much if the hive turns your ship into component atoms. Sometimes ugly and functional beats beautiful and dead." Throughout the fleet, similar scenes were playing out. Volani crews learned how to manually override their automated safety systems, allowing their ships to perform maneuvers that their computers insisted were impossible. Zenthari warriors practiced boarding actions in confined spaces, abandoning their traditional long-range combat styles for brutal close-quarters fighting. Even the peaceful Murtal survivors were being taught how to use their ship's industrial fabrication equipment to manufacture improvised weapons. Admiral Chen moved between ships like a force of nature, personally overseeing the most critical modifications. She was currently aboard the Volani Dreadnought Peaceful Contemplation, working with their weapons officer to reprogram their targeting systems. "Your energy cannons are designed for precise, surgical strikes," she explained to the bemused alien officer. "That works great in a civilized battle where everyone follows the rules. But we're going to teach you how to use them for area denial and psychological warfare instead." "I do not understand," replied Weapons Master Jethra. "How can a precision instrument be used imprecisely?" Chen smiled grimly. "By not aiming at what you want to hit. Watch this." She brought up a tactical simulation showing a hive fleet formation. "Instead of targeting their ships directly, you target the space around them. Create a wall of energy that forces them to move where you want them to go. Make them choose between bad options and worse ones." As the modifications continued, the human crews began teaching their alien counterparts the most important lesson of asymmetric warfare: how to think like prey that had become predator. The Volani learned to use their superior speed not for elegant maneuvers, but for hit-and-run attacks that struck without warning and vanished before retaliation was possible. The Zenthari discovered that their crystal hulls could be deliberately shattered and regrown, creating a regenerative armor system that could absorb tremendous damage. But the most important change was psychological. The aliens were learning to abandon their conception of warfare as a noble art and embrace it as a vicious, chaotic struggle for survival. "Admiral," came the voice of Lieutenant Torres over the comm system, "we're detecting movement from the hive fleet." "They're beginning their approach." Chen was instantly alert. "Time to engagement?" 4 hours at current speed, ma'am." "They're coming in fast and confident." Chen smiled coldly. Confidence was exactly what she had been hoping for. An overconfident enemy was one that made mistakes, and the plan she had developed depended entirely on the hive making very specific mistakes. She activated the fleet-wide communication system, broadcasting to every ship in the combined human-alien force. "All vessels, this is Admiral Chen. Final positions, people." Remember, the key to this entire operation is making them think we're desperate and disorganized. They've been winning so easily that they've forgotten what a real fight looks like. We're going to remind them. The fleet began to move into position with practiced precision. The human ships took up positions deep within the system's asteroid belt, using the rocky debris as both cover and weapons. The alien vessels, now uglied and armored like their human counterparts, spread out in what appeared to be a panicked, disorganized defensive line. To any observer, it would look like a hastily assembled force trying desperately to protect the Volani homeworld, with insufficient resources and poor coordination. The Hive, having grown accustomed to easy victories against elegant but predictable alien tactics, would see exactly what they expected to see: another doomed coalition force, preparing to die heroically and uselessly. What they wouldn't see was the carefully planned killing field that had been prepared for them. "Admiral," reported the sensor officer aboard the Retribution, "Hive scouts are approaching the outer perimeter. They're scanning our formations." "Let them look," Chen replied. "Make sure they see exactly what we want them to see." The scout ships were biological monstrosities, looking like enormous parasites with sensor clusters instead of eyes. They moved through space with an organic flowing motion that was both beautiful and deeply unsettling. As they scanned the defensive positions, Chen could almost feel their alien intelligence analyzing the coalition forces and finding them wanting. Perfect. The scouts withdrew, returning to the main Hive fleet with their intelligence. Chen waited, watching the tactical display as the enemy force adjusted its formation based on what their scouts had reported. The Hive was forming up for a traditional engagement, confident that their overwhelming numbers and superior adaptation abilities would carry the day just as they had in dozens of previous battles. "All ships, prepare for engagement," Chen broadcast. "Remember, we're not here to fight fair. We're here to win ugly and go home alive. Let them come to us." The Hive fleet began its final approach, thousands of organic ships moving in perfect synchronization like a school of predatory fish. They had no reason to suspect that this battle would be any different from the others, another coalition force that would fight bravely and conventionally before being overwhelmed and consumed. They were about to learn why humanity had earned its reputation as the galaxy's most dangerous species to corner. Admiral Chen watched the approaching enemy fleet with the patience of a born predator. In her mind, she was already 3 moves ahead, anticipating the Hive's responses to tactics they had never encountered before. The aliens had called for aid, and humanity had answered. Now it was time to show the galaxy what Deathworlders could do when they decided to stop playing by civilized rules. The first phase of the battle began exactly as Admiral Chen had predicted. The Hive fleet, numbering nearly 7,000 vessels, approached the coalition defensive line with the supreme confidence of predators that had never met their match. Their organic ships moved in perfect formation, biomechanical perfection that had evolved through hundreds of successful conquests. "Enemy fleet entering maximum weapons range," reported the tactical officer aboard the Retribution. "They're maintaining standard approach formation." Chen nodded, watching as the alien commanders on her shared tactical network began to show signs of nervousness. Even with all their modifications and training, seeing an enemy force 30 times their size approaching was enough to shake anyone's confidence. "Steady," she broadcast to all ships. "Let them get closer. Remember, we want them committed to this approach vector." The Hive opened fire first, as she had known they would. Streams of bioplasma and acid-based energy weapons reached out across space toward the coalition line. The alien ships, following their new human-taught protocols, didn't try to absorb the hits with their shields. Instead, they scattered like startled birds, breaking formation in what appeared to be panic. "Now they think we're afraid," Chen muttered with satisfaction. "Come on, you bastards. Take the bait." The Hive fleet surged forward, sensing easy prey. Their formation tightened as they pursued the fleeing coalition ships, drawing them deeper into the system and closer to the asteroid belt where the real trap waited. To the Hive's adapted intelligence, this looked exactly like every other battle they had won. Civilized aliens breaking under pressure and fleeing in disorder. "Admiral," came the voice of Ambassador Cathara over the communication link. "My people are asking if this is really part of the plan. Some of my captains are concerned about appearing so cowardly. Tell them that looking cowardly now means they'll be alive to look brave later," Chen replied tersely. "Phase 2 initiates in 30 seconds. She watched the timer count down as the Hive fleet moved deeper into the killing field. They were passing through the carefully calculated zone, where the asteroid belt's gravitational effects would interfere with their ability to maneuver as a unified force. Their organic ships, designed for smooth coordination, were about to encounter something they had never faced before: chaos. "All units, execute Phase 2, Chen commanded. The human destroyers that had been hiding deep in the asteroid belt suddenly came to life, their engines igniting as they began pushing the largest asteroids directly into the path of the advancing Hive fleet. Simultaneously, the fleeing coalition ships reversed course, their newly installed human weapon systems opening fire, not at the enemy ships, but at strategic points in the asteroid field itself. The result was magnificent chaos. Asteroids that had been stable for millennia suddenly began careening through space in unpredictable directions. The Hive fleet, which had been moving in perfect formation, was forced to scatter as house-sized chunks of rock smashed through their ranks. Their bioadaptive systems, designed to counter energy weapons and tactical maneuvers, had no protocols for dealing with random gravitational chaos. Direct hit on their command cluster, reported Torres excitedly. 3 large bioships colliding with asteroid debris. But Chen wasn't satisfied with just disrupting their formation. As the Hive ship struggled to adapt to the new environmental hazards, she initiated Phase 3. All boarding craft launch now. This was perhaps the most insane part of her plan. While the Hive ships were distracted by the asteroid bombardment, human assault shuttles launched from concealed positions throughout the belt. These weren't attacks aimed at destroying enemy ships. They were aimed at boarding them. The concept of boarding actions was completely alien to the Hive collective. Their ships were biological entities, living creatures that had never encountered an enemy willing to literally cut their way inside and fight hand-to-hand in cramped corridors. The human boarding parties, equipped with plasma cutters and close combat weapons, began carving their way into the organic hulls like antibodies gone rogue. Boarding Party 7 reports successful penetration of enemy biocruiser, came the report from Commander Hayes, who was personally leading one of the assault teams. These things don't have internal defenses for repelling boarders. It's like they never imagined anyone would be crazy enough to try this. The Hive fleet was beginning to show signs of actual confusion for the first time in their known history. Their adaptive systems simply had no framework for dealing with enemies that fought from inside their own bodies, or with environmental hazards that changed randomly rather than following tactical patterns. But the humans weren't done yet. Phase 4, Chen announced, and every ship in the human fleet began broadcasting on multiple frequencies simultaneously. The broadcasts weren't communication attempts. They were every piece of music, literature, art, and random human cultural data that the fleet's computers contained. Thousands of hours of human noise, from classical symphonies to death metal, from Shakespeare to internet memes, from children's lullabies to military cadences. The effect on the Hive's bio-neural networks was immediate and devastating. The collective relied on organic quantum communication between ships, a system that had evolved in the silence of deep space. Suddenly flooding their communication channels with chaotic, emotionally charged human cultural output was like screaming random words at someone trying to have a quiet conversation. Their formation coherence is dropping rapidly, reported the Zenthari ship singer, Veltar, his crystalline voice ringing with amazement. They appear to be confused. Chen smiled grimly as she watched the Hive fleet begin to show signs of genuine disarray. Ships that should have been moving in perfect coordination were now firing on each other, their targeting systems disrupted by the cultural static flooding their networks. Some were fleeing in random directions while others seemed to be attacking asteroids as if they were enemy vessels. All coalition forces advance and engage at will, she commanded. Show them what we learned from you about precision targeting. But do it while they can't coordinate a response. The modified alien ships surged forward, their elegant energy weapons now used with brutally efficient human tactical doctrine, instead of the honorable ship-to-ship duels they had originally planned. They focused fire on disabled or isolated enemy vessels, picking apart the Hive fleet piece by piece while their enemies struggled to adapt to completely unexpected circumstances. The battle that the Hive had expected to be another easy victory was rapidly turning into their first major defeat. They had encountered an enemy that didn't follow the rules of civilized warfare, one that was willing to use everything from random asteroids to children's songs as weapons. But Admiral Chen knew this was only the beginning. The Hive Collective was vast and adaptable. They would learn from this defeat and come back stronger, which was exactly what she was counting on. Admiral, reported Lieutenant Torres, enemy fleet is beginning to withdraw. Should we pursue? Negative, Chen replied, watching as the surviving Hive ships fled the system in disorder. Let them go. They need to get back to the rest of the collective and tell them what happened here. Ambassador Cathara appeared on the communication screen, her elegant features showing a mixture of amazement and horror. Admiral Chen, we have achieved victory, but what you have shown us today changes everything. This is not how civilized beings wage war. Chen nodded solemnly. No, Ambassador, it's not. But sometimes civilization is a luxury you can't afford. The question is, are you willing to learn how to fight like us, or do you want to stay civilized and hope the Hive gives up after one defeat? The silence on the communication channel told her everything she needed to know about the answer. 3 months after the Battle of Volani Prime, Admiral Chen stood in the command center of what had once been the most luxurious space station in Coalition space. The crystalline gardens of Harmony had been transformed into something that would have horrified its original architects, a military command facility that looked like it had been designed by particularly violent engineers rather than artists. The beautiful curved walls were now covered with tactical displays, showing fleet movements across dozens of star systems. The peaceful meditation alcoves had been converted into briefing rooms where alien officers learned the finer points of psychological warfare and asymmetric tactics. The entire station hummed with an energy that spoke of controlled violence rather than serene contemplation. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Earth Command," reported Commander Hayes, who now bore the insignia of humanity's first galactic liaison officer. Chen nodded, watching as the holographic display activated to show Admiral Morrison, her superior and oldest friend, broadcasting from Earth's orbital command station. Behind him, she could see the familiar blue-green marble of humanity's homeworld, looking deceptively peaceful. "Sarah," Morrison began without preamble, "I've just finished reading your latest tactical reports. Please tell me you haven't actually taught these aliens how to use civilian cargo ships as improvised kinetic weapons?" "Only in extreme circumstances, sir," Chen replied with a perfectly straight face, "and only against military targets. We've been very clear about maintaining some standards." Morrison looked like he was developing a headache. "Sarah, the diplomatic corps is having conniptions. They're saying we're turning the galaxy's most civilized species into a bunch of space pirates." "With respect, sir, the diplomatic corps isn't the one fighting for survival against an enemy that wants to turn every sentient being in the galaxy into biomass. Sometimes you have to choose between being civilized and being alive." The Admiral sighed. "What's the current strategic situation?" Chen gestured to the tactical display, which expanded to show a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red zones indicated areas under Hive control, blue showed Coalition territory, and green marked the growing number of systems where human-trained forces had achieved victories. The Hive Collective has responded to their defeat here by accelerating their expansion efforts, she reported. "They're trying to overwhelm us with sheer numbers before we can spread our tactical innovations too widely. But they're also making mistakes now. They're no longer assuming every battle will be an easy victory." The map showed the results of those changes. Where once the red zones had expanded steadily outward like a cancer, they now showed irregular patterns. Areas where Hive forces had been stopped or even pushed back by Coalition forces employing human-taught tactics. The Zenthari have become particularly effective at what they call crystal shard bombardment. Chen continued. "They shatter their own ships' hulls into millions of sharp fragments and use them as area denial weapons. The Volani have mastered hit-and-run tactics using their superior speed. Even the peaceful Murtal have learned to use their weather control technology for military purposes." Morrison studied the map with growing amazement. "How are they adapting to these changes psychologically? These species have been peaceful for millennia." Chen was quiet for a moment, thinking about the conversation she'd had with alien officers who were struggling to reconcile their new military effectiveness with their cultural values. "It's not easy for them, sir. Many of them are having what we might call moral crises. They're discovering capabilities they didn't know they had, and they're not sure how they feel about that." She gestured to a group of alien officers working at nearby tactical stations. "But they're also discovering something else, that sometimes protecting what you love requires doing things you hate. Ambassador Cathara told me last week that her people have a new saying. Peace is a gift we give to our children by being willing to make war for them." "And the Hive? How are they responding to these new tactics?" Chen's expression grew grim. "They're adapting as expected. Each engagement teaches them something new about our methods, but that's actually working in our favor in an unexpected way." She manipulated the display to show recent battle recordings. "The Hive Collective operates on biological efficiency principles. They adapt to overcome specific threats. But human tactical doctrine isn't based on efficiency. It's based on unpredictability, creativity, and sheer bloody-mindedness. Every time they adapt to counter one of our tactics, we just invent 3 new ones that make no logical sense. The recordings showed increasingly bizarre battle scenarios. Coalition ships using FTL jumps to literally ram enemy vessels. Hive bioships being confused by holographic projections of non-existent fleets. Human boarding parties using improvised weapons that included everything from kitchen utensils to children's toys that had been weaponized through human ingenuity. The key insight, Chen continued, is that the Hive Collective thinks like a superorganism trying to solve optimization problems. They can't comprehend enemies who deliberately choose inefficient solutions because those solutions are unexpected. We're teaching the galaxy how to be strategically irrational. Morrison was quiet for several minutes, studying the tactical data and battle reports. Finally, he looked up at his former student with an expression that mixed pride and concern. Sarah, what you've accomplished here is remarkable. You've turned the tide of an interstellar war and potentially saved multiple civilizations from extinction. But I have to ask, what happens when this war is over? You've fundamentally changed these species. They're never going to be the same peaceful artistic civilizations they were before. Chen nodded slowly. It was a question that kept her awake at night. Sir, I think about that constantly. We've taught them how to fight, how to think like predators, how to use violence as a tool. Some of them are horrified by what they've become. Others are excited by it. She paused, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed as peaceful as they once had. But the alternative was extinction. And maybe, just maybe, they needed to learn these lessons anyway. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and being civilized only works if everyone agrees to be civilized. The Hive taught them that the universe doesn't always offer that luxury, Morrison observed. Exactly. So we taught them how to survive when civilization fails. Chen turned back to the display, where new reports were coming in of coalition victories across multiple fronts. The question now isn't whether we can win this war. It's what kind of galaxy we're going to build after we do. The transmission ended, leaving Chen alone with her thoughts and the weight of responsibility for fundamentally altering the balance of power in the galaxy. Outside the station's viewport, she could see a formation of human and alien ships conducting joint training exercises. Their movements a deadly ballet that combined human tactical ruthlessness with alien technological superiority. Humanity had answered the call for aid, bringing with them the brutal lessons learned on a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. The galaxy would never be the same, but it would survive, and sometimes that was enough. The stars no longer belonged only to the civilized. They belonged to those willing to fight for them, with whatever weapons necessity demanded and whatever tactics survival required. The galaxy had learned what it meant to be human, to face impossible odds with stubborn refusal to surrender, to fight dirty when fighting clean meant death, and to never, ever give up as long as there was still breath in your body and fight left in your heart. The Deathworlders had come to stay.